What's going on, everyone? My name is Joe, and I'm from Adoption. My goal is to make Bitcoin easy to understand so you feel comfortable adopting and using it today. In today's video, we're going to have a chat about the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, kind of the early history of Bitcoin and why it really doesn't matter who Satoshi is or what their intentions were or why they're even here today. Stay tuned for more. First explaining who created Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was created in 2008 by an individual or a group of people named Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, Satoshi Nakamoto was a pseudonym used for the original creators of Bitcoin. And what that means is it essentially was a fake name used to mask their identity. Now let's go back in the timeline quickly and explain, the early days of the Bitcoin white paper, and then that'll help with my conversation of explaining Satoshi and his, her, or their intentions. In October of 2008, the Bitcoin white paper was first officially published by Satoshi Nakamoto on, I believe, the original cryptographer chat forum or mailing list that existed at that time. Now, that was the first time we'd ever heard of Bitcoin. That was also the first time Satoshi came forward. Now, fast forward to January 3rd, 2009. That was actually when the first block was mined. Now, the first block of a blockchain is called the Genesis block. What a Genesis block is, it's exactly that. It's the first block that's created. And in a blockchain, all of the blocks all of the blocks refer to blocks before them. So, if you think about it, the Genesis block is the first block in a tower at the foot. And then as time goes on, blocks are added up on top of that. And they all relate eventually back down to that original first Genesis block. Now, on January 3rd, 2009, on the header of the original Genesis block was the line "Chancellor on brink of second bailout to banks." Now, this was hinting that Bitcoin's creation was because of the 2008 financial crisis. Now, it was unique because that's also, I believe, the papers in the UK and Europe at that time were talking about the chancellors giving funding and bailing out the banks. So again, and the Bitcoin white paper is actually out there. I can put it in the notes. I recommend that everyone goes out and reads it, and it explains exactly why Bitcoin was created, and it gives a good technical breakdown of the actual technology itself. Now let's fast forward to January 2009. That's when the second user, a guy named Hal Finney, joined the network and he started mining Bitcoin. In October 2009, that's when the first Bitcoin was sold for dollars, or for fiat currencies that we call them. Now this was unique. This was unique because, in my opinion, at least, in October 2009, the first time that Bitcoin was actually traded for currency, that from there on, that was ultimately what proved that it is a currency. That is the first time that it had an exchange rate, and someone actually had purchased some Bitcoin. So, if you look at markets, right, in a market, you have to have buyers and sellers. And, typically price fluctuates based on, supply and demand. But in a market alone, you have buyers and sellers. And in October 2009, I think that was the first time that we actually had a true market. And then from there on out, the rest is history. No one could argue anymore that Bitcoin was worthless, because if you go right back to 2009, you'll see that it was actually trading for money. So that meant that there was two people in the world that agreed that there was a value put on this, and they were willing to pay a certain amount of money for the actual Bitcoin. In May 22nd, 2010, that's where the famous pizza story comes into play. That's when Laszlo, I'm going to butcher his last name, but Henyeks, bought two pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin. And I think last time we were going through the last bull market, late 2017, early 2018, I think I saw something like the exchange rate and the cost of those two pizzas were in the millions of dollars, right? But this was early on, obviously way early on, and Laszlo could have never knew. And quite honestly, I think he's probably doing pretty well since then. And in December 12th, 2010, that's the last time we actually heard from Satoshi. Satoshi ended up disappearing at that time. I believe at the same time period as well. I think one of the core Bitcoin developers had been called in by the CIA to give a talk there, and that's when Satoshi disappeared. So again, Satoshi, we don't know if it's a male, we don't know if it's a female, we don't know if they're a group of people. But it doesn't really matter, right? There's a lot of technologies that exist today. There's a lot of mathematical formulas that exist today. Some that we do know the creators, some that we don't. But the fact is that they're still operating on and they're functioning like they're supposed to. Bitcoin isn't owned by one person, and again, it's not owned by Satoshi Nakamoto. It's not owned by one bank, by one government. It's a decentralized, distributed ledger system. So, we like to say the people are Bitcoin, or the people are Satoshi, and Satoshi is the people. Everyone that participates in the Bitcoin network, is providing security and value to it. Satoshi just happened to be the one who combined a lot of pre-existing technologies and theories into one piece of technology that actually worked and made all of these concepts works that were coming about during that time period. One of the books that you can actually purchase if you would like to read some of the original writings by Satoshi is a book called The Book of Satoshi. Now you can purchase that on Amazon. That's one of my personal favorites. And what the author did is they actually went through all of the email chat forms at the time and gathered a lot of the emails that Satoshi was writing at that time and compiled it into one book to explain, why this was created. And I think it's important to remember as well that, Bitcoin was created at the heart of the last financial crisis. This is back in 2008 and 9, where, we learned that the banking elites and the banksters had really, taken money and had a lot of risk involved in fraudulent practices and loans. They were lending money to individuals who could not pay for mortgages. But at the same time, we realized that in 2007 and 8 and 9, there was a lot of inflation that came from that. There was a lot of money that was printed after the housing crisis, and that's because the dollar is an inflationary currency, right? It's not gold. It doesn't have a fixed supply. You can create more dollars out of thin air, and the Fed is doing that right now as we speak during the next financial crisis. Now, it's, here we are 10 or 11 years later, and with that thought in mind, Bitcoin is working today like it was created back then. It is hard, sound money. Just like gold, there's only so much Bitcoin that exists, 21 million in whole. No more will ever be created. And as time goes on, that will become more scarce, so it'll become worth more. It's what they call a deflationary asset. It's the opposite of the dollar, which is an inflationary asset. And this is important for people like you and I because, when you think about currencies and savings, you always want to be saving in hard money. There's a saying, your dollar tomorrow is worth less than a dollar today. And what that means is that, tomorrow and as time goes forward, more money is typically created, and that makes all of the money that we have now worth less in the future. But with Bitcoin, just like gold, there's only so much of it that will ever exist. There's only so much of it that will ever be created. So, your money in the future, your Bitcoin in the future is always going to hold more value than it does today. So in my opinion, I view Satoshi as, a group of people that understood economics. They understood a lot of different theories, competition and game theory. They were a group of people that understood different technologies, and they were able to combine all this to create the system that we have today, which is we are now seeing is helping us throughout this next financial crisis. Here we are in April 2020. The Dow dropped 40% this spring. The Fed just printed $6 trillion over the last couple weeks. So we're seeing that our money supply is being inflated again. But Bitcoin is still there, capped at 21 million, operating at 100%. It has not stopped in the last 10 or 11 years. It has not gone down once, has not been hacked once. And that's all because of what Satoshi actually provided for us. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, it doesn't matter who Satoshi is. This is a community type of currency, and it's one that is going to help the world going forward. Well, I hope this made it a little bit easier for you to understand who Satoshi is, who the creator of Bitcoin was. If you have any questions, definitely leave them in the comments section for me. Videos are kind of new for me, and I got to get used to, actually talking in front of a camera. So if you leave comments, there could be something that I forgot to say or I didn't mention, but I can also elaborate further if I start to learn what people are asking most. So leave a comment, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time, y'all.